Yeah, okay, so I'm just going to get started going through the process involved setting up a layout. And so you can see I've already got some layout tabs down the bottom, but I'm going to start with a brand new one by clicking New Layout. But prior to that, I'm just going to show you something quick. If you double click with the wheel, it'll do a zoom extents. And so Z enter and then E enter will do the same thing. And you can see there it's zoomed right out, which tells me that there are objects outside of this little plan that I really want to work with, but I can't see them. So I'm going to have a look in the list of layers, and I can see there's a frozen layer. So I'm going to turn that on by unfreeze it. And so there are these objects out in space here, which I don't really want anymore. So they're all from a demolition layer. So I'll just delete all of those. And now I'll double click with the wheel again. And you can see then it's zooming in a bit more. Let's see, there should be any other layers there. So there's a layer that's turned off as well. So I'm just going to try deleting then anything that's out here. Oh, that's all of it. And there still must be something hidden. I don't want to spend too long on it. So I didn't create this drawing, but well, another thing you can try is moving these objects. If it still keeps zooming out like that, then moving these into a new file is sometimes the only other solution. But yeah, that's a bit weird. I'll just try typing RE and then enter, and that'll do a regen. Oh, RE and then enter does a regen, which is regenerating the drawing from scratch. So it's redrawing everything, which will fix up the graphics. And so I'm just making windows over these areas. Sometimes you've got things that are just too small to see, and no, it doesn't look like there's anything there.
So is it important to make sure you don't have anything around?
Oh, it just helps when you're making layouts, because the initial viewports are going to zoom to show the extents, so it'll show the same view when I go to make a page. So that's what I was going to show you next. If I go and click on the little plus to make a new layout, my new layout's called Layout 3. And so when I go to that, you can see it's giving me that view. So I can still just zoom in there, but it can help if you know, especially when you've got big projects, if you just clear out anything that you don't need before you go and work with your layouts. And then the first step to set up that page is to set the page size. So when you right click on any of those layout tabs, you can just go to Page Setup Manager. And then you don't need to select anything here, you just click Modify. And you can see here, it's got the page size I want. I just want to go and set up an A4 page to begin with. But the units are inches. So you need to change that to millimetres, which you'll see will then affect the scale. So you've got to set that back to 1:1. And so that's actually setting a metric page. And if I click, well, I'll do one last step. While I'm at it, I'll set the plot style table to monochrome, which is going to make everything print black and white. So if you don't do that, it'll print with the colours that you have set in your layers.
Is there also a function not to print line weights?
You can set a plot style up to do that, okay. But this monochrome plots, yeah, it'll print using the line weights in your layers, okay. But then it with black and white set to override everything else. And so yeah, so I'll just click OK there. And so now this is normal. You'll see the viewport will become much smaller on the page, because again I've gone from imperial to metric. And then you can close this, and you can select the initial viewport just by clicking on the border, and you can resize that as necessary to get the size you want. But I'm going to delete that viewport and just show you how to make a new one. So I've just used delete on the keyboard to delete that, and then under the so it's not on the view tab, it's on the layout tab, and sorry, they've moved it around a bit. Oh, sorry, layout is at the end here, so you can drag these tabs around, and layout normally isn't at the end, but someone's moved it there. So the layout tab, you can see, has the options for making viewports. And so if you click on where you've got the layout viewports panel, the rectangular button, that will let you click 2 points to make a rectangular viewport. And if you click on the drop down there, you can make different shaped viewports. So you can make any shape you like, basically, with with straight edges. You can also get curves as well if you use the object option. So I'll delete that polygon viewport though, again just selecting it and then clicking delete. And so you can see there I'm zooming around and panning, and it's affecting the whole page. And that's because I've got down in the status bar the paper button is active, so that means we're in paper space, working on the page. So zooming in and out is going to zoom with the whole page. When you click on the paper button and change it to model, it takes you to model space, and zooming and panning there affects only things inside the viewport. So now I'm just zooming roughly to get the objects that I want shown in this viewport centered inside it. And then to set the scale accurately, you have the scale button essentially on the status bar again, and I'll try some different scales here. So I'll start maybe with 1 to 50, because it's a fairly small room. We can fit a 1 to 50 drawing on an A4 page. But I'll just show you some different scales. If I try 1 to 100, it'll become exactly half the size in both directions, so that means it's a quarter of the area. If I go back to say 1 to 20, that'll zoom right in, and it would probably be too big for this page. So again, I'll go back to 1 to 50, and that scale would probably work for this page size. And then I just wanted to show you a bit about how the text and other things work at the different scales. So back on the model tab, I've gone and I've opened up the app thing. That can be quite interesting if you have a look at that, but I'll go back to the home tab. And you've got there some dimensioning tools. You've also got the annotate tab, which has all of the dimensioning tools, but the ones on the home tab usually are going to be enough. And so there also you have the annotation drop-down panel, which gives you quick access to those annotation styles, mainly for text and dimensions, but also leaders and tables. And so I'm going to start by going to the dimension style button just next to where you choose the dimension style. From that list there, you have the button that lets you edit your dimension styles. So that's a really handy, quick option. And then you can see there we've got this dimension style dim 50 and another one called standard. So dim 50 is pretty close to what I want, but you might not have one like this. So I'll go to standard, which is one that you'll often have, and it's set up the way that in America they have it set up in AutoCAD, which is probably not what you want, but if I show you how to change this, then you'll know how to make your own from scratch. So I'm going to click on the new button, and I'll call it dim, doesn't really matter. This will work for all the dimensions, this one style. And then continue. Oh, sorry, I'm going to tick before I click continue. Annotative, which you can set later, but it doesn't hurt to set it here.
What is the only style available to you as ISO 25?
Yeah, that's the same as, that's very similar to standard, so you can do the same things I'm doing here. So I'm going to hit continue, and I'm basically going to go through all the options that you need to set. And so I'm going to start on the Fit tab, just so you can see if you miss that annotative option, you can always go there and just turn on annotative. Then it's always good to check the units. So under primary units, sometimes it'll have a comma set instead of a decimal period. So always check that, make sure it is on period. And then the precision, because we're working in millimetres, I'll usually just set to 0 so we don't have any decimal places, because you shouldn't need them for millimetres. You can still round off if you like, so I'll sometimes round off to the nearest 5 mil, but in this case, because we might have some details where we want smaller dimensions, maybe I'll just set it to round off to the nearest 1. And then back to symbols and arrows. I'm going to change the arrowheads to architectural ticks. So the first and second should change together. And then the leader's up to you, which arrowhead you want for your leaders. And I'll just use right angle, but you can use any of those arrow styles that you like, really. And then the arrow size, I'm going to increase to, I'm just going to try 1 for now. And you can see that it seems like everything's gotten really large, but I'm going to go back to the Lines tab now and check all these other measurements. And so initially they're in inches, and now I'm going to set them all to millimetres. Baseline spacing actually isn't that important, but I'll set it to, let's say, 2.5 for now. You won't see that make a change. But then extend beyond dim lines. We'll change that to, let's say, 1. Extend beyond ticks as well. I'll make that 1. So you can see that's this amount that it comes out beyond the tick in this case. And then we've got offset from origin, and I'll make that 2. And I'm also going to turn on fixed length extension lines, which again I'll make about 5 for now. So you can see things look a bit messy, mainly because the text is still really small and it's still using that previous text style. So I'll come back to this tab once I've changed the text, and you'll see these numbers will make a lot more sense. So for now, I'm going to go to text. And again, you can see there the text height is in inches. It's also using a text style called standard. So I'm going to hit browse, and again make a new, this time new text style. Again, I'll just call it dim. The height I'm going to leave on 0. And the font, you can really use any font you like, but I'm going to use a simple one, Roman S, or Romance, which is Roman simplex essentially. And so you can see there a preview of it. It's just a very basic single line font. And then I'll close the text style dialog box, and it'll ask me, do I want to apply these changes? I'll say yes. And then from the list in my dimension style, I can choose my new text style. Okay, so then I can adjust the text height, and I'll set that to 2. And you can see now that the other lines in the dimension relative to the text read much better. So I can go now back to symbols and arrows, and I'll actually try a larger arrow size. I'll go for 2, even 2.5 is okay, but 2 is probably about right here. And then back to the lines tab, and I'll just adjust some of these settings so you can see a bit more clearly in the preview how they change. So I'll change extend beyond ticks there to 2, and you can see there the line coming out to the side is bigger. Back to 1, you'll see that change again. If you turn off fixed length extension lines, then you'll see the gap that you get with the offset from origin. But you'll see when you have that option turned on, it's really useful if you want all your dimensions to look neat. And I'll just draw some for you to show you that. So so that's everything done for the dimension style. So I'm just going to hit OK, and it's going to tell me about the overrides. That's fine. I'm going to click OK, and then make sure that the current dimension style is mine, dim. If it's not, you can always just select it and then click Set Current. So I'll close this now, and then see if I have any layers for this. I probably don't, so I'll make a annotation layer. So I'll just call it A Anno. Make it current, and drawing some dimensions. So again, on the Home tab, you've got the annotation panel with the linear button. And here, if you haven't set a scale, it's going to ask you what scale you want. And so remember, I've used 1 to 50 on the page. So I'm going to choose 1 to 50 here, and then click OK. And you'll see down on the status bar, it's set the scale there. So you can always set it there in advance as well. Okay, so I'm just going to click a couple of points to measure over my walls, place it to one side, and then click linear again, and maybe just do some internal measurements. So notice how no matter how far I move that dimension away, the extension lines, the lines that measure the objects essentially, are always the same length. So I'll just click a place over here, and that's what that fixed length extension line does basically. Okay, so it's looking okay, except this 100 measurement is going to one side. So you can always try adjusting that position. If you turn ortho off, or polar as well, sometimes can cause some problems, can make it a bit easier. But here you can see it's going to try and move that left and right. So I'm going to go back into the dimension style. Oh, so it's my text style. So back to dimensions, and modify that, and on the Fit tab, sorry, got a over dimension line width leader, I think is the one we want. Yeah. And so that will give you different text placement, and again I can try adjusting this now, and you can see that's giving me a bit more freedom as well to put the text somewhere else where it's maybe a bit clearer. And again here, do the same thing. Okay, so I'm just going to, well, firstly I'll go to the layout, so layout 3 now, you can see doesn't have a viewport big enough to see that dimension. So I'm going to go to paper by clicking on the model button, and then I'll just select that viewport and click somewhere on the edge but not on the corners, and that'll let me drag it to one side. Now I can again select the border and click on one of the grips and move it to the left, and then I can see my dimensions. So I'm just going to go back there and change the scale now on the model tab to 1:20. So you may have some dimensions for a detail or something that you're doing, and so I'll just put those in again with linear, and I'll do a measurement from the one side of the bench to the wall, place that to one side. Okay, so you can see straight away that the text is a different size to what we've got over here, and that's normal because I've set a different scale. So it's setting up the text size for me, well, I'll just show you if I go to layout.
You want it to be different
Yeah.
sizes.
Yes. Yeah, it should be different size because it's basically scaled when you go onto the page. So if I go onto layout 3 now, you'll see it won't show me that dimension because it's not the right size for this viewport. But if I go onto, I'll do a new, I'll just do a new viewport on this page. So again on the layout tab, I'll just go to rectangular, and I'll just put a small viewport there. Clicking on the paper button to go to model, I can then zoom in on the area I want. So I know the dimensions around here, and notice it's showing, well, it's actually picking up this 1:20 dimension, which it shouldn't. So I'm going to set a different scale. I'm going to choose, say, 1:100, and it'll disappear. So it's not showing me any dimensions there. But if I zoom in on that area where I know I have my dimension, and then I choose 1:20, it automatically knows to show the dimension set for that that scale. So it's something that's not obvious at first when you're drawing things like text and dimensions in AutoCAD, that they're hidden automatically if they're not the right scale for your viewport. And that's really the thing that trips people up the most when they first start drawing them with annotative. No, you can annotate everything, and so you just need to know the scale though. And normally, in most drawings, you'll only have a couple of scales. Often you'll only have one scale that you're using from a certain drawing. So from that floor plan, I might only intend to be showing it at 1:50. But there might be cases where I do want part of that drawing showing again somewhere else at a different scale. So you do have that option of drawing multiple things on it at different scales. But then more commonly you'd have a series of drawings and you'll know what scale you're going to be presenting those. And so you just need to remember to set the scale that's going to be used on your page in advance from this list here before you draw anything like text or dimensions. And then finally, all of that only applies with that annotative option. So, so that's better. So, what you might have seen if you've done it with Tanya might have shown you before in a slightly different way, using styles with names like what we've got here, also in the list here. It's been taken away, but there was one called Dim 50 before. So that's set up just for 1:50. And so the older way of doing it was to have a dimension style for each scale. And then you'd have to choose the dimension style that you wanted for each different scale that you needed to print out. And then when you set up your pages, you'd have to freeze and unfreeze the dimensions manually, and you'd have all the dimensions on different layers. And so for every scale, you'd have a different layer, and then you'd freeze and unfreeze them depending on the scale that you're printing out. And so really that annotative option does all of that work for you. But you just need to be aware that it is going to hide and unhide both text and dimensions. So I'll show you some text. Text is much easier. So here next to the text style list, where I've only got these two text styles, I can go to the text style button. So I've got this dim text style which is for dimensions, and I tend to just leave that for dimensions only, and so then make a new one for the other text. So I'll just call this say labels or something, and maybe I'll make it Roman D, which is Roman duplex, so it's a 2-line font. Double click on it to make it current, and then here I'm going to set a height. So I'll make it 3.5, and also I'm going to tick annotative. So we can just hit apply and close. And then, I don't know which text tool you've used more often, multi-line or single line? No? So I'll start with multi-line. And you can just click and drag, also click 2 points to make a rectangle. And then we'll give the text, so boardroom. Might be the label for this room. And you can see there it's fairly small. That's again because of the scale. So if I go to 1 to 50 and just do the same thing again, clicking on the text button, I'll then just make a rectangle and then again type my text. And you can see it's coming much larger because that's for 1 to 50. And unlike dimensions, you can, well, it's easier with text anyway than it is with dimensions to have multiple scales. So there is an option if you want to have the same bit of text show for 2 different scales, you can do that. But often it's better to have the 2 different text objects because chances are you want them in different places anyway. So for the 1 to 50 you maybe would have it, try and have it centered in the room, or maybe at least near the middle. And for the 1 to 20 you can probably have it over the table. And so it doesn't hurt to have the 2 different text objects. They're not going to show together because again, back on the page, you can see only the 1 to 50 text shows in the 1 to 50 drawing, and here I'll just pan so that you can see it. It'll be up here somewhere. There it is, the 1 to 20. So I'll zoom, so I'll just fix the 1 to 20 scale. And that can make it clearer because then you can see both the text objects end up being the same size on the page because it's zoomed appropriately to achieve that. Going back here as well, so this dimension, you can see the text is the same size as the dimensions over here. It's just that back in model you're looking at everything in 1-to-1 essentially, so things appear different sizes. So they're the main things for making pages, especially when you start doing annotation. And then finally, if you go back to paper, you can select the page, the viewport border, and if you want to make it non-printing, you can put it on a non-printing layer. And so it doesn't hurt to make one. I usually make one called Viewports and set it to be non-printing. But a really good quick way is just to use the def points layer. So def points is a system layer that you'll often have. Once you make a dimension, it creates that layer. And so with def points, well, anything you put on def points is non-printing. So I'm just going to change both of those viewports to that layer. And maybe just make that a bit neater, so I'll go back to the viewport, so the border of the viewport.
There's a little button that usually comes up or like a symbol that shows that it's a non-printing.
Oh, in your layer manager, so if you go into layer properties, you can make any layer non-printing that way. Yeah.
And I know that AutoCAD is for the purposes of documenting, but if you've got a project where you've got to put a plan into an overall like presentation like this,
Yeah.
how do you, can you export it as a PDF?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that you can then put it into like InDesign.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the final thing, and so maybe I'll just move these dimensions over a bit to give me a bit more room. So I'm switching between model space and paper space here, just to be able to select those things. And so I'll move that viewport right over, and that'll give me a bit more room to make that viewport bigger and show something useful. And then, so if I wanted to take that into InDesign and do my title block and everything there, you can always draw lines and do your text on the page if you want to do the title block in AutoCAD. But to take it out, the easiest way is to print to a PDF. So if you just go to print and plot.
And the other day when I was trying to do this, everything was going to one side of the page and I couldn't work out in my settings whether I needed to centre it or...
Oh yeah, just normally centre it. So the trick is, once you choose your PDF converter, and with AutoCAD you've got a couple of options. You can use the Adobe PDF, or you've got DWG to PDF if you don't have the Adobe suite on your computer.
Which is better if you're going to use the Adobe suite over Adobe?
Much of them, they're very similar. But yeah, I will use the Adobe PDF. But the other one's good too. And so then you just set it up the way you're setting up a printer. So with printing from a layout, you should usually choose layout as the option to plot. And then you shouldn't need to centre it. Well, you don't even have that option. Yep. And then the scale, make sure that's 1:1. Monochrome for your plot style if you want black and white. Apply to layout will save the changes. And then if I click preview, I'll get a good idea how it's going to look. So I can cancel this and all those settings will stay there. And I might do that because with a drawing like this, you may want the viewport border. So I can always select it and then change it back to a printing layer, and then back to print and then plot, preview, and now I can see what it looks like with the border. So that's fine. And I might just add a few more things. So you may want a title to label those drawings, even though you're going to do more in InDesign. So I'll just make that viewport a little bit smaller. Yep, that's okay. And then, so using the same text style, just up here, I can go again to, I'll just use multi-line again. And so I'll just click a couple of points. And so this might be floor plan. Let's move that down a bit. And we'll look at doing proper labels and things later. So doing a reference there is a good idea, but maybe only for more technical drawings anyway. And so I'll do another one here. Sync. That'll do it. Okay, so notice how I didn't have to make a new text style. It automatically set it to the right size, because on the page you're working one-to-one. So this would be the same size as the text over here, which you probably want a different text size actually for the labels, but just to show you an example. So again, you can preview this, and that's all working. I'll move that text over, but for now I'll just click OK. That'll make a PDF for me, so I'll just put that somewhere. And so you can just open that in, or bring that into InDesign. So do you know about using place in InDesign? Yep. And if it doesn't come through transparent, make sure you make it transparent, because you don't want to be cutting out all the white and trying to fill in all the holes.
Do you need to make it transparent in CAD?
No, it should be automatically, but then there's an option in InDesign if it isn't automatic. So yeah, because when you're rendering and doing those other things in InDesign,
Yeah.
much easier. So maybe while InDesign's opening, I'll just point out another couple of things that are related. Your dashed lines, you'll see here. If I go to zoom now, I've gone to model, and I want to zoom in and have a look at my dashed lines. The problem is it's going to change the scale if I do that. So you've got an option next to your scale to lock the viewport scale, so that open paddler, and that way when you zoom it won't change the scale. And then, so InDesign's open. And then back on the model tab you can see I've got these lines at the scale I want, or showing with the dashed line type. But then what's happening if I, so just try that again. Yeah, that's unusual. Okay, so I think that's just because if I type RE, yeah, they're all going to be updated. So, and so this one's gone now as well. And so what that shows me is that it was set up fine for one-to-one, but it wasn't set properly for the scale that we're working at. And so again, to make that work properly, if you go to the line type panel, go to other, and then show details. And you'll see then the global scale factor, which you were probably, if you've adjusted this earlier, you were setting that globally for all the scales initially when you're in the model tab. Once you start working with pages, it's a good idea to set that, well first try just setting it to 1, and then OK. And now you can see it's giving me dashed lines again. But we don't really know what scale we're looking at here. I've got 1 to 50 there, which gives me an indication. But then back on my layout, you'll see more clearly. So, so that's the size dashed is at 1 to 50. Now, there's a bit of a funny thing with AutoCAD, just because of the way the line type scale. I found if you set this global scale factor to roughly 2.5, and that seems to give you a better line type scale, and that works globally. So in other words, if you have a different scaled viewport, I'll just pan so that we can see some of these dashed lines. There we are. Okay, so there's some dashed lines that show in both viewports, and notice how even though the size of these objects is different, the line type size is the same, which is what you want. Okay, so InDesign's open, and I'll just make a new page. Go away. Okay, so make a new page. That's A4 and landscape, and then file place, and you can bring in any PDF. Okay, so I'll just click roughly to place that, and of course it's gone and rotated, but that's okay, we can easily rotate it in here. Okay, so it's shrunk down a little bit because it didn't take up the whole page, but that's okay, we know the scale's right. And, well actually it's not going to fit within the printable area maybe anyway. It should be right though actually, because it'll have more than that. And so it's showing a little bit pixelated because of the display settings in InDesign. But when you right click on it and then go down to display performance and set it to high quality display, that will improve that. And then you can zoom in and see the line work. So if you check your layers, you'll see that I've got layer 1, which is the layer this PDF's on. If I make a new layer called layer 2, and I'll rename that and call it fill, and I'll move it down below layer 1. Oops. Okay, and then I'll just draw something simple, just a rectangle, and we'll make sure we've got a fill color set to something. Ah, did I do that? Sorry, I've got my thing still selected, so I better deselect that first. And then go to make a rectangle. What's my color? Okay, so I'll just do something under the room there, and you can see it's coming transparent. So that's what I mean when I say transparent, just so that the line works see-through, or it's see-through around the line work. And so then you can keep shading in, so if you want to shade in the table or something, you don't have to go and draw inside each of those lines, which takes forever. And so that's it. I'll just maybe do another quick one. So if you not sure what I mean, so I'll just do a quick rectangle, and we'll make it another colour. And I've gone to layer 1, that's clever. So back to fill, and try that again. There we go. So much easier than rendering around the lines, which I've seen people do, especially when they do it in Photoshop. Yeah. And it takes days to do something that should take, you know, half an hour. The pen tool, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, yeah.